On January 20th, 1993, William Jefferson Clinton became the 42nd President of the United States. At the time, most Americans were not aware of the extent of Clinton's criminal background, nor were they aware of the media blackout, which kept this information from the public. As State Attorney General and later Governor, Bill Clinton in 12 years achieved absolute control over the political, legal, and financial systems of Arkansas. As president, he would attempt to do the same with the nation by bringing members of his inner circle with him to Washington. The hijacking of America was underway, and its impact on future generations would be incalculable.
Bill Clinton was born in Hope and, of course, raised in Hot Springs. They had open bawdy houses over there at the time, and they had open gambling at the time. But Clinton grew up in that atmosphere, that different atmosphere of Hot Springs. If it felt good, you did it. He was selected to go to the national from Arkansas Boys State, to be a delegate to the National Boys State. And while he was there, he was able to meet John Kennedy. And I'm sure that sparked an ambition in this young man. And he apparently has always had an exceptional, keen mind, a keen intellect. And he early, evidently, had tremendous ambitions. He was gifted in so many ways. The truth is, he's one of the most charming men that I've ever met in my life. He has more energy than any 10 people I've ever known. He was able to network himself into running for Attorney General virtually unopposed. And then he was able to take that position and catapult himself into the governor's office 2 years later and started building his foundation.
When you think about Bill Clinton's aversion to the truth, you wonder if this is because of the lackadaisical moral background that he's had in this area. He lied about Rhodes, being a Rhodes Scholar. He never completed that and still said he was a Rhodes Scholar. He went to Moscow and did business with them against the United States government, and he wasn't challenged by the press about that. In Arkansas, while he was governor, he said he balanced the budget 11 times. He never did it once. Also, he said he didn't raise taxes, and he raised taxes 126 times.
He can accommodate any situation that comes up because he's not hemmed in with the truth. I've never felt that Clinton, consciously or unconsciously, was hemmed in with morality.
I first met Bill Clinton in the mid to late 70s. He was an up-and-coming politician. There were a group of us, Jim Guy Tucker, Bill Clinton, Sheffield Nelson, and myself. And we kind of ran around and palled around with each other. It was from that point that I did a lot of projects for Bill from a marketing perspective. In 1988, I went to Bill. And I said, I need a job to kind of relax, mellow out. Bill Clinton and Betsy Wright, they suggested that I go to work for a place called the Arkansas Development Finance Authority. And they said my talents could really be used there. It was the best kept secret in Arkansas. The fact that I was brought in by Bill Clinton meant that there was something about me that everybody had to be careful with. After about 2 weeks, I went to Wooten Epps, and I said, Wooten, I think I've got enough background on this that we can start marketing it. Now, what is the criteria for loans? He said, whoever Bill wants to get a loan. To go back, though, to that moment in time, I'd been there about a month, and I realized that I was in the epicenter of what I'd always heard about all my life. What most people have heard about is the machine. I was literally working, sitting in the middle of Bill Clinton's political machine. It was where he made payoffs, where he repaid favors to people for campaign support. I was in an interesting seat, and I knew it. We had a board meeting. In that particular board meeting, I was sitting at the end of the table. James Brannion, who was chairman of the board at that time, was sitting at the head of the table. James Brannion stood up in a public restaurant, and he hollered at the Beverly Enterprises guy, Bobby Stevens, and said, "Did you get the $50,000 campaign contribution from the client that you're introducing the loan for?" He said, "Not yet." He said, "Well, then hold up the loan till we get it." I stood up, went up to James, and I said, "James, don't yell stuff like that. You don't need to be yelling it in a restaurant. That sounds real bad." He was just burly and arrogant. He said, "Who cares?"
Bill Clinton sold the concept of ADFA to the people of Arkansas as a vehicle for creating jobs and assisting churches and schools. In reality, millions of taxpayer-guaranteed dollars were being channeled to Clinton's election campaigns, to his inner circle of friends, and to his wife Hillary's law firm. This may explain why ADFA had been drafted in such a manner as to keep its decision-making procedures secret.
If you needed $1 million, you had to get your application handled by the Rose Law Firm, pay them $50,000. There were 5 other companies in the state of Arkansas that were actually more qualified in bond structuring and applications, but Rose Law Firm got them all. I started checking around, and I kept asking, well, you know, one thing's bothering me to the comptroller, Bill Wilson, you know, how do people make payments on these loans? He looked at me and said, they don't. He thought I knew. Well, that blew my mind. And this is about 2 months in, and it was getting tough then. So I started gathering the documents. After everybody left, I would stick around as if I were working on the annual report. That would give me access to all the documents, and I make copies of them all. For about 2 months, I watched accounts accumulate money. At the end of the month, they zero balanced. I didn't understand totally what that meant, but I thought I'd go ahead and steal the records anyway. I did. It was soon after that that I met a man named Bill Duncan. Bill Duncan took the zero balance, and he told me what that meant. He said, "You know what that means?" I said, He said, "They're laundering drug money." There were $100 million a month in cocaine coming in and out of Mena, Arkansas. They had a problem. They were doing so much money in cocaine, $100 million. You create a problem in a little state like Arkansas. How do you clean $100 million a month? ADFA, until 1989, never banked in Arkansas. What they would do is they would ship the money down to Florida, a bank in Florida, which later would be connected to BCCI. They would ship money to a bank in Atlanta, Georgia, which, by the way, was later connected to BCCI. They'd ship to Citicorp in New York, which would send the money overseas. And there's an interesting one, a bank in Chicago. That bank, by the way, is partially owned by Dan Rostenkowski. Dan Lassiter would get the bonds. He would become the broker for the bonds. He would transfer money back to ADFA. He never sold a bond. The money then would leave ADFA, go into one of the various banks for the specific bond loan, and they would zero it out. When they zeroed it out, they were giving it back to Lassiter, less their handling fees.
During the Lassiter investigation, we had numerous witnesses for the federal grand jury, had extensive testimony. People that was connected with Lassiter and drug use and everything else. His cocaine use become used as a tool for sexual favors and also for business deals that influence people. And that's when Mr. Lassiter became quite flamboyant with his cocaine use, and then ultimately led to his arrest and conviction.
Dan Lassiter, who was the best friend of Bill Clinton, who went to jail with Roger Clinton for cocaine. And by the way, let me explain something. He didn't sell cocaine. No, they were giving it away. Huge piles of cocaine in his office. Ashtray upon ashtray full at the parties, and they would give it to young girls. That's sick. I mean, they were giving a highly addictive drug to young girls.
One particular one that comes to mind is a 14-year-old cheerleader out of North Little Rock. She was a virgin, and ultimately he ended up sending her to a physician of his. The physician put her on birth control pills. He used cocaine in order to ultimately she lost her virginity, and she got addicted to cocaine. And the last I heard of her, when we had her subpoenaed back to the federal grand jury, she was a hooker in Lake Tahoe.
Dan Lassiter contracted to launder the money. Now, in addition to his contract to launder the money and the system that he and Bill Clinton had set up to do it, probably what he did is he took advantage of some of the cocaine. That's why he could give it away. Shoot, you have $100 million a month in cocaine. They wouldn't care if you took a bucket full a day.
After Lassiter was indicted, I started to receive quite a bit of harassment from my own department, the Arkansas State Police. And I knew the reason behind it because the affiliation with the state police and the governor's office with Dan Lassiter and his business associates.
Once he was convicted, he and Roger went to a minimum security prison, a holiday hotel we call them. He spent, I think it was 6 to 8 months, and he got out. Unbeknownst to anybody, Bill Clinton, the day after he got out, granted him a full and complete pardon. So if you think he's tough on crime, think about a man that pardons a man that gives cocaine to kids.
Fear of violence is robbing our children of their future. We must take away that fear and give them hope. We must give Alicia and all our children back their childhood. Working together, we can.
Do something now. Call 1-800-WE-PREVENT.
Your president, the President of the United States, not only was a part of a system that was laundering millions of cocaine dollars, your president signed off on it. He can't deny that he did. You see, because of that, there's one little catch. Every loan that ADFA made, Bill Clinton himself had to sign off on it. More than Bill Clinton, you better identify the people in the loop of the drug running. You better identify the people in the loop for money laundering. And what you'll find there is those people go straight to Washington. Act 1062, if you look at it, it says that ADFA was developed and created to provide low-interest bond loans for churches, schools, colleges. So now look what happened to our legislature. They voted on a bill creating ADFA, thinking that they were getting money to colleges and schools to buy books and so forth. What better way to run thousands of, tens of millions of dollars, launder it, clean it up, and use the cover of a state agency to do it. The first loan made at ADFA was made to Parkometer, a company called Parkometer. Seth Ward was the owner. As I started looking, I found out that the Secretary-Treasurer was Webb Hubbell. Then I found out Webb Hubbell was Seth Ward's son-in-law. Guess who drafted the legislation creating Act 1062, which created the Arkansas Development Finance Authority? Webb Hubbell. Guess who introduced the legislation to our legislators and got it passed through our House? Webb Hubbell. Guess who got the first loan? Webb Hubbell. Imagine this. Guess who did the audit and the evaluation of the application? Rose Law Firm. You guessed it. Who signed it? Webb Hubbell, Hillary Clinton. You see, that's against the law in Arkansas. You can't investigate yourself when the good faith and credit of the state of Arkansas was involved in a bond issue. He broke the law. Good Lord willing, creek don't rise, Mr. Hubbell will be serving some time in the pen for that one.
Ironically, Webb Hubbell, a senior partner at the Rose law firm, was chairman of the Conflicts of Interest Committee at Rose. In 1988, he successfully advanced the Ethics in Government Act, which required Arkansas legislators to report governmental conflicts of interest. Incredibly, this law specifically exempted Governor Bill Clinton, his appointees, and his relatives. Clinton's appointment of Hubbell to the U.S. Justice Department exemplified the administration's total disregard for legal ethics. Hubbell's hasty resignation in March 1994 for supposed overbilling of Rose clients was merely a ploy to remove Hubbell from the limelight before extensive criminal charges could be brought against him.
Let me tell you about Parkometer. The first loan was $2.85 million. Never was a penny of that paid back. It was all a scam. They had, let's say, 100 employees when they started. They got $2.85 million. You know how many employees they had after they got that influx of cash? 100. Didn't increase anything. There's not a new building on the property. They didn't even remodel a bathroom. As the newspaper people started inquiring about the Parkometer loans, what they found was that instead of making parking meters, Parkometer was actually building retrofit nose cone compartments that were being shipped to MENA. We find out that the nose cones were actually being used to smuggle dope back into the country. And what is scary, what's so scary, it's the same cast of characters. Webb Hubbell, the Rose Law Firm, are guilty, I say to you, of conspiring to defraud the state of Arkansas, the federal government, and conspired to solicit the sales and the laundering of money for illegal drugs. This is your president. This is his circle of power. These are the people, when he got elected president, he did not pass go. He took them straight to Washington with him. And by all things holy, I think he was planning to set up and do the same thing in Washington.
In 1982, cocaine trafficker Barry Seal set up one of the largest drug smuggling operations in the United States in Mena, Arkansas, under the approving eye of Governor Bill Clinton.
Barry Seal had a bunch of planes and supposedly had pilots. Barry Seal was a drug smuggler. Now, he tried to set it up in his home state of Louisiana, but they wouldn't let him. He had to come to a state that had a sleazy governor hooked on cocaine, and everybody knew it. Yeah, Bill Clinton was hooked on cocaine.
In 1983, I was made aware that Sheriff Hadaway and one of his auxiliary deputies, Terry Capehart, were investigating a smuggling operation going on at the Mena airport. They had an inside source of information.
Mr. Seal, it was our understanding, was the one who had brought the operation into the Mena airport, and that had initiated the beginning of the money laundering and the illegal activity.
He said 1983 was his most profitable cocaine smuggling period ever. Said that the airplanes that he had placed at the Mena airport, there were 4 of them, a couple of Senecas and a couple of Panthers, and 1 or 2 stragglers here and there, different airplanes. He said they were purchased solely for the purpose of cocaine smuggling.
There was, in my opinion, more than enough evidence to prosecute a number of people for crimes regarding the Barry Seal case at Mena.
I snuck around, crawled through the bushes, thinking that I'd really have to hide to see them unloading the dope. Didn't have to. You could walk right up to the airport and they'd unload it right in front of you. They would unload it. They'd offload it. They didn't care.
A certain degree of money laundering had taken place among these people that were associated with Barry Seal.
What had not been done was to connect the dotted lines to ADFA. Because once you connected the dotted lines to ADFA, you had actually connected the dotted line to Clinton.
In addition to the operations at Mina, small clearings in other parts of the state were used as drop points for money and cocaine.
They had special cargo doors installed in the side without FAA permission so that these doors could be opened in flight. They'd pull in, slide back, and the cocaine could be dropped out of the side in flight.
When you have a public which is aware of an ongoing criminal enterprise, when you have an international cocaine smuggler who is high profile, and a lot of people know that they are operating in a small area. A lot of people knew about the money laundering. It was common gossip on the street because it was so blatant. And they see investigations ongoing for several years. And they keep watching for indictments. They know grand juries are convening. They know that witnesses are supposed to be providing evidence to a grand jury, yet year after year after year, no indictments are returned. People lose confidence in the system.
Clinton had integrated a number of corrupt cops, judges, and politicians into high-level positions to ensure the continued success of the drug smuggling, money laundering operations. All was going well until a fateful night in the fall of 1987.
On August 22nd, 1987, Kevin had spent the night with his friend Don Henry. They left Don's home around 12:30 or 1:45 on the 23rd of August in early morning hours, and the next thing we knew, they had been run over by a train. There seems to be a small airstrip in the area. There have been sightings and reports of small airplanes flying very low with lights off in the area. I believe they saw something they shouldn't have seen. 3 weeks later, their deaths were ruled accidental by the state medical examiner, Fahmy Malek, and we disagreed with that ruling because we thought the evidence pointed to homicide. At that point, we had a lot of questions and no answers, and the facts didn't add up to what he was telling us, so we decided to get a second opinion and met with resistance from all fronts, both with our local law enforcement, with the state crime lab, with everybody that we turned to. We obtained court orders requesting samples of everything that the crime lab had for a second opinion, and Fahmy Malek resisted court orders. He refused to obey them.
Ultimately, it was proven that Don Henry had been stabbed in the back and Kevin Ives' skull had been crushed prior to the placement of their bodies on the railroad tracks. However, Malek stood by his ruling that the boys had simply fallen asleep on the tracks. Malek had been kept in office at the insistence of Governor Clinton for a number of years, despite vigorous public outcry to have him removed. Clinton's mother, Virginia Kelly, an anesthesiologist, had allegedly caused the deaths of 2 patients due to her negligence. She was sued, yet Malek's rulings resulted in her being cleared.
Malek had covered up for Bill Clinton's mother, Virginia Kelly, in some deaths there in Hot Springs. I do know that there were some damages that were settled out of court, and Virginia Kelly was forced into retirement. And it appears that perhaps Bill Clinton was protecting Malek on behalf of his mother.
As long as Malek's rulings pleased the governor's office or state police, they were left to stand, no matter how implausible. Malek's obvious lack of medical knowledge reached a pinnacle when he ruled that James Milam, who had been decapitated, had died of natural causes. Yet Clinton, who had the power to remove Malek from office, insisted he stay.
It didn't seem to matter what Malek did. Clinton protected him. He made excuses such as he's overworked, he's just stressed out, he's underpaid. They gave him a $14,000 raise, which was an insult to my family as well as a lot of others in the state who to this day are struggling with asinine rulings in the deaths of children and other loved ones. I was outraged that protecting a political crony Clinton's was more important than the fact that 2 young boys had been murdered. And it didn't matter what Malik did. There were allegations of tampering with evidence in murder cases. There were allegations of perjury in different cases. There were allegations of incompetence and anything that I guess you could allege had been alleged against him, but it didn't matter what he did. They protected him.
A number of people approached the police with information about Don and Kevin's murders and consequently were murdered themselves.
Shortly before Keith McCaskill was murdered, he knew that he was fixing to be murdered. He told his family goodbye, he told his friends goodbye. The night of elections in 1988, he took 2 pennies out of his pocket and threw them on the bar there at the wagon wheel and said, "If Jim Steed loses this election, my life isn't worth 2 cents." And he was murdered that night. Jeff Rhodes was a young man from Benton who was murdered in 1989. Shortly before his death, he made a phone call to his dad in Texas and told him he needed to get out of Benton, Arkansas, that he felt he knew too much about the boys on the railroad tracks and the death of Keith McCaskill. A couple of weeks later, Jeff was found dead. He'd been shot in the head. They'd attempted to cut off his head and hands and feet, set him on fire in a dump.
A total of 6 people with information about the boys' murders were eventually murdered as well. This woman, former head of the Saline County Drug Task Force, had uncovered evidence of the Arkansas Police Department's participation in the drug smuggling operation and the cover-up of the boys' murders. She was forced into hiding.
There aren't any words in the English language that can describe how it makes you feel as a parent or as a citizen of Arkansas to see what our officials are capable of doing. You know, I think we were just kind of naive, common, ordinary people. Got up and went to work every day and came home and went to bed and assumed that everybody else did the same thing and tried to do what was right. And I think Kevin's death has been the rudest awakening that anybody could ever have to see what really goes on and to see what's important to elected and public officials.
When Fahmy Malak finally became a political liability during the campaign for president, he was forced to resign. But guess what? Bill Clinton created a $74,000 a year job doing nothing just for him.
I would like an answer from Bill Clinton as to why the main conspirators, as far as I'm concerned, in the murder of my son and the cover-up of the murder of my son have been elevated in status by creating cushy jobs for them.
Meanwhile, Welch and Duncan's investigation into the operation at Mina was about to derail.
We'd been so busy investigating, just concentrating, focusing, that it took a while to register that nothing was going to happen.
We could not understand what was happening. Neither Mr. Welch nor I were ever subpoenaed to testify before the grand jury and present massive amounts of evidence of wrongdoing by associates of Barry Seal. No indictments were ever returned against any of the individuals, and I can tell you there was extensive evidence.
There definitely was some suppression of evidence and definitely a cover-up of an investigation, and somebody should be held accountable as to why that happened.
Not one major cocaine bust was ever made in Arkansas out of Mina, Arkansas. Now imagine that, 10 years nearly in its running. Never one truckload ever got caught.
During the 1992 Attorney General's race in Arkansas, a member of Clinton's staff had approached Winston Bryant and had asked him to stay away from the Mina affair or the Mina matter.
I've done quite a bit of investigation into the Mina Barry Seal case myself, and quite frankly, it is a federal problem.
After Winston took office, Bill told me that he was no longer allowed to discuss the Mena Airport investigation from the Attorney General's office.
The Attorney General's office is not like most Attorney General's offices across the country. We do not have the authority to convene a grand jury and initiate criminal prosecution.
I've always thought it was a wonderful thing to be able to serve your country as a federal law enforcement agent. And for 15 years, I did not encounter anything like the corruption which I encountered after the Mena investigations began.
President Clinton's verbal commitment to a war on drugs has been negated by his actions. During his first weeks in office, Clinton revoked random drug testing for White House staff members. He eliminated 121 positions at the Office of National Drug Control. And he appointed Jocelyn Elders as U.S. Surgeon General, despite her well-known desire to legalize drugs.
That's important to know. That out of Mena came certain trails. One of the trails was to the banks down in Florida. One of those trails led to BCCI. And guess who started BCCI, helped form it? Jack Stevens, from Stevens Investment.
Jack is a major stockholder in Worthing Bank. At a crucial period in the campaign, the bank advanced Clinton's candidacy $2.8 million. It happened that that's the identical amount that the Stevens company had made on a concocted transaction that involved student loan funds under Clinton's control less than 2 years before. An identical amount.
That's very important. When Clinton had Laster, he didn't need the Stevenses. All of a sudden, in 1988, while I was at the Arkansas Development Finance Authority, in came the Stevenses. Laster was in jail. The ADFA had never even put its money in a state bank. It always kept its money in banks in Chicago, Georgia, Florida. When the Stevenses come in, they buy Worthing Bank. And guess where ADFA puts all of its money? Worthing Bank. When Bill and Hillary first took over, all they could talk about was how their health care program was going to go after the pharmaceutical companies. Well, lo and behold, stocks for the pharmaceutical companies went down. Who other than Vince Foster, Hillary Clinton, took advantage of it, and they bought stock. All of a sudden, they go to Tulsa to the governor's convention, and guess what they say? They're not going to attack the pharmaceuticals. And guess what happened? The stock goes higher. I go to the meeting, I say, guys, come on. Doesn't that look a little weird? That's called, insider trading. And I said, yeah, but she only made $10,000 or $12,000, just a minuscule amount. Think about it. That's what she made. Has anybody gone to the trouble to look in to see how much Stevens Investments made off of that?
One of Hillary's investments, under the direction of Tyson Foods counselor James Blair, netted almost $100,000 on an initial $1,000 investment, a nearly impossible feat using legal methods.
I can't read their minds or speculate, but I had absolutely no reason to believe that I got any favorable treatment.
Coincidentally, Governor Clinton enacted a number of state regulations allowing Tyson Foods to grow into the largest industry in Arkansas.
Don Tyson put in $600,000-$700,000 all told in all of Bill Clinton's campaign. Guess what he got out of it? He got $10 million. Guess from where? The Arkansas Development Finance Authority. And he never paid a dime for it.
I had heard rumors of Don Tyson and his alleged cocaine use and distribution. And I went through the intelligence files and come up with enough that I thought was sufficient amount of evidence to launch an investigation on Mr. Tyson's simply out of the Arkansas State Police intelligence files has been accumulated for years.
Don Tyson was in the middle of the cocaine just like Bill Clinton, just like Dan Lasker, just like Roger Clinton, and all the others. So you see, all of this incest, and all of this drug running, all of the trafficking of drugs, sending them all over the nation, came out of Little Mena, Arkansas, right under the nose of little Governor Billy Clinton. I went to Bill, and I said, Bill, you've got 2 weeks to tell the truth, or I'm going to tell it. You're breaking the law, and I can't be a part of it. You made a mistake. I'm not one of your buds, or at least I'm not that big a buddy.
When Larry Nichols made his disclosures, made them public, the Clinton spin doctors treated him unmercifully. It shocked those